Picture the perfect American family, the perfect American home. They have the best, look picturesque, and are in the front pew every Sunday. But under the surface bubbles a rotten poison. Financial ruin is just around the corner. But the need to keep up appearances digs a hole that there is no crawling out of. But there is a way out. The father realizes that the creditors can't come calling if everyone is dead. And after all, father knows best. Welcome to Everything Vaguely Paranormal. How's it going, y'all? Welcome to Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I am Ryan Roberts, and these are my partners in the paranormal, Blake Smith and Shelley Pruitt. I pointed backwards. This thing always confuses me because it's mirrored, and so I always get
We answered anything within reason. It's just fine.
But you know who I'm talking about. You see these people every week. You see me every week. And this week, it's going to get a little bit, it's going to get a little gory this week.
I'm ready for this week. I'm ready.
We are starting our month of malicious males. Our ferocious females did so well last month. And that was kind of like the Mother's Day thing. Well, we're going Father's Day this month, talking about malicious males. And we had a whole lot more to choose from for this month's.
Yeah.
I think you're going to be excited about some of the ones that we have coming up.
Like, throw a dart, you're bound to hit a man that's done something heinous in his life.
And more often than not, with a lot of them have families too, who have done
a lot
some
of
real
them
heinous
do.
stuff. And this one tonight, man, this guy, he had a family, and he's the family annihilator, John List.
Those of you true crime people, you know what that means.
Yeah, so we got a lot to kind of unpack and get into tonight, so we'll just jump right into it because this guy is a very interesting dude. He's a very boring dude, actually, and you'll see, but he's also very interesting at the same time. I know that doesn't sound like it makes sense, but it will as we get into it because
he lived a very boring life, but he was anything but boring.
He did. And just wait till we get to what happens. But I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the story. And
who are we talking about, Ryan?
Oh, I said John List.
John List. Okay.
Yeah, the family annihilator, John List.
Family annihilator, John List. I just wanted to make sure because I was like, wait a minute. Did you tell him who we're talking about?
Oh, yeah.
I'm catching up here.
This guy's messed up.
Yeah, he is. He's a sick individual. But we'll go ahead and jump right in and we'll get started with John List, y'all. So John List was the family annihilator. That's what he's known as. And he was born in Bay City, Michigan on September the 17th, 1925 to Frederick List and Emil List. And he was born in a German-speaking community. His dad was like straight up German, and so he knew German and grew up around people, so he spoke English and German at the same time. And his parents are kind of interesting in the fact that they were actually second cousins. His father.
We got a problem right off the bat, don't we?
Lord.
Yeah. So his father was actually married before he met John's father. I mean, yeah, before he met John's mother, not his father. So John's mother, Alma, was actually John's dad's previous wife's hospice nurse. because she was dying and she took care of her. So that's how they met. And they ended up marrying. And not only was he her second cousin, but he was also 20 years her senior. And
so he went after him, a younger woman.
Yes, he did. He went after him, a very younger woman.
So wait, hold on. I'm trying to make sure I understand this. So you have John List's father, who was married. This lady went into hospice. This was her nurse, and this is who he ended up marrying 20 years.
He married her hospice nurse.
Yes. All right, gotcha.
Alma. Now, John
who is his second cousin?
Who was his second cousin?
Got it. I'm with you.
We're already off to a convoluted story here. All right.
It was his uncle's brother, sister's cousin's mama's daddy's uncle. Now, so John was born into this family, and John's dad was always kind of a cold individual towards John. He never really had much to do with him. He kind of just was there. He would always call John the boy. He never referred to John as his son whatsoever. He would just call him the boy all the time. And he just didn't really have much to do with his son except for instilling in him a very intense Puritan work ethic. And he taught his son that charity and welfare were absolutely sinful, and you were not to accept charity or welfare under any circumstances, because God punished people who were poor, and it was their fault that they were poor, and they had incurred God's wrath. So we're already off to a rousing start with John.
Shit.
And
so Daddy got some hot takes, huh?
Yeah, Daddy had some hot takes, and he was a very staunch Lutheran, and Bible study was very important. Read the Bible all the time. And his mom wasn't much better. I mean, she was actually very doting, and she loved John a lot, but she was very overprotective. I mean, to the point where John couldn't really have any friends or play with any friends because his mom didn't want him going out in the yard. And, and this is like, the 30s, 40s, like running around the neighborhood with all the other kids. Yeah. He wasn't allowed to go anywhere near the street. He wasn't allowed to go anywhere near the train tracks, where all the kids were playing kind of close to both. And so he had to end up spending a lot of time hanging out with mom and dad at the house, reading the Bible. And that was his leisure time, reading the Bible, or reading books, but mostly the Bible. And
that was at the direction of his father. This wasn't
his father. Mm-hmm.
Hey, it's my free time, this is what I want to read. It was kind of like,
this is what you will be reading,
forcing me to read that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I mean, he would read books too, but most of the time, he was just like under the watchful eye of his mom and dad. You have to stay here. Right. You can't go anywhere. You're not leaving the house. You're going to be here.
Gotcha.
And his mom and dad didn't really do much either. Their only real social outlet was the local Lutheran church that they attended every time the doors were open. And this is where, this was their only real social outlet, to talk to anybody or do anything. I mean, they didn't really party. They didn't do anything. They were just kind of boring, run-of-the-mill people who just went to church, and that was it. And at this church, John was taught that the smallest little bit of disobedience would send him straight to hell. So John became almost overly obedient to authority figures because of this. And he just craved that praise of authority figures. And, he wanted to be, this doted upon by authority figures so much that he actually got a false sense of superiority over the other children, because he's like, look at me, I am.
So if he was praised, that made him feel as if he was better than they were, because look, I can do it, but you can't.
Yes. And he was drilled on Bible teachings and Bible verses and everything. And, the other kids were interested in doing what kids do, but John,
he kind of wasn't allowed to be a kid.
He wasn't really allowed to be a kid.
What it sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah. He was at church, and he was just drilled all the time, constantly. But all these like authority figures are like, look at John. Why can't you be more like John? And kind of held him up as an example.
Shining example of what to do. Mm-hmm. So did John have any brothers or sisters?
I believe he was just an only child.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So John develops a sense of superiority over the other kids, and he actually thought the other kids were heathens. So he just kind of, recruited further into his. Yeah. I mean, I grew up with some kids that were some damn heathens. But
most of them were the preacher's kids.
Oh yeah,
I was a heathen. I was a heathen.
So John, he develops this false sense of superiority over everybody. And on top of that, he was also taught not to really feel anything. His dad taught him that men don't show emotion. Men take all their emotions, bottle them up, push them deep down inside. And how you deal with that is you go to church and you work. That is what you do. That is how you deal with all of your emotions. You throw everything into your work and your service to God.
So
you don't.
Healthy.
Oh yeah, and that's not going to show up later on and be,
no, not at all.
anything.
Yeah, I don't see how that could be a problem.
No, and so he bottles up everything.
He was taught to be stoic and emotionless.
He was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was taught to be stoic and emotionless and go to church, and that's what you did. You worked, you ate, you slept, and you went to church.
And you praised God. That's right. You praised the Lord.
That was it. And that's not a healthy environment for a boy to grow up in, and it
not a healthy environment for anybody to grow up in.
It doesn't allow the child to establish any kind of identity or sense of worth outside of the four walls that he lives in.
Right.
I'm assuming he went to school.
He did.
He did go to school.
He did. Now, that's the thing is, he was taught to be so stoic and so quiet and so out of the way and, not to make waves. Let's just bottle everything up and put it down inside. That actually his classmates don't really remember much about him. He was so normal that when people were asked about him, they said they barely remembered him. And they said that he just kind of blended into the background. And the only things they could remember about him when he was in high school was he was tall, he was a good dresser, he was very religious, and he was a loner. That's the only thing they could remember about him.
But they could remember nothing personality-wise. He had basically become invisible.
No personality-wise, no nothing. He just kind of blended in with everything.
Oh.
And as a matter of fact, he was so boring and so just there that, in the yearbooks where they vote you like most likely to be a celebrity or most likely to... They voted him most likely to be in the Army Supply Corps. That was in his yearbook. And what does that say? That just goes to show how boring and
that's
how
oddly
out of the way you are.
Specific, and really, that is not something I would ever think anybody would just go, yes, I'm going to be in the Army Supply Corps. That's going to be my course of study. Yeah, that's a very oddly specific thing.
I mean, the only thing I can figure is maybe it was a joke that someone put in because he was so just boring and to kind of gain traction.
No, I mean, unless they're taking it from being such a regimented person,
yeah,
there you go.
That could be it.
That was the thought process, that you're so regimented as a person that that's
regimented, organized. You follow the rules. You do what
you're going to go in. Yeah.
Now he actually does go into the Army because when John graduates high school in 1943, World War II was raging. And John felt called as a young man to go serve his country. Now, this is like one of the only times that John kind of goes against what his mother wants, because his mom did not want him to go. And he's just like, I think it's my duty to fight the Nazis and I'm going to go. And he did. He enrolled in the Army, and he thought he was going to go fight the Nazi scourge, but they sent him straight to Louisiana. And
fight the Louisiana scourge?
They send him straight to Louisiana. That's where he's at. I mean, he is not. He's not sent over there. He's sent to Louisiana.
You want to talk about going from very regimented, very sheltered into Nolans, which is the nonstop party, the alcohol flowing freely, the voodoo, the witchcraft, the different mixing of cultures and themes and ideas, and whoa, that had to have been culture shock for him.
Yeah, you can only imagine just being so religious as as I'm sure that he was, not necessarily in his youth by choice, but at the discretion of his father, how all the evil he would have seen, all the
definitely would have perceived it as that, right?
Quote unquote evil he would have perceived it as.
And the thing is too, is he doesn't really do much in Louisiana. He kind of stays around the base and kind of lives on base and stuff. And while he's down there, his father actually dies, and he goes home to attend the funeral. And all of his friends and family said that John calmly attended the funeral and showed no emotion, like he was just going to go run an errand. Like he was just going to go mail a letter. He just went, and he was there. And, why would he show emotion? He was taught not to show emotion.
He was taught not to. He was doing exactly what his father taught him.
Yeah. And, if your father is cold to you and you don't have like any real sense of familial ties other than like, hey, this is the asshole who treated me like this my entire life. I mean, why would he show any sort of emotion. He was just there. And, you know, he goes and attends his father's funeral, and he comes back to Louisiana, and he's there for a little while. And then it happens. In April of 1945, John and his regiment are sent to Europe to go fight the Nazis. Now, when they go over there, this is like the last couple of months of the war. Actually, it's in the last month of the war, you know, because I mean, you know, the Nazis are about to surrender. The Nazis knew that the war was over. So, and the Americans knew the war was over too, but they still needed people to go over and just kind of, you know, be back up and be support. So John and his regiment go over there, and they're actually patrolling, and they get captured by some Nazis. And the Nazis have them captured for a whole afternoon. And the Nazis realize that their goose is cooked and that the war's over, so we might as well just surrender to the Americans because they're here anyway. So the Nazis actually end up surrendering to John and his troop, and John actually brokered the peace because John could speak German. And so he brokers the peace with the Nazis, takes them in, and he's actually awarded the Bronze Star by the United States government because
outstanding service, right?
And you know, and technically he was a POW for a whole afternoon. So he was a POW, gets the Bronze Star, and
sorry, that just I don't mean to laugh at the fact of him being
wrong.
a POW.
It's just afternoon, and then they go, you know what, we're gonna lose anyway. Why don't you just go ahead and take us in? We surrender.
Yeah,
we caught you fair and square.
It's
but,
like the juxtaposition of it is what's making me
laugh. I'm quite sure there are some POWs that would find it highly offensive that he was given the Bronze Star after he was only captive for an afternoon, after they've been captive for years and years and years and years and years and put through horrible things. So I can see how that would be slightly offensive.
Yeah, you know, and it's probably the only outstanding thing he ever did in his life. That's probably the most interesting story about him because, I mean, he's just boring old John. You know, boring old, I go to work, I go to church, I eat, sleep, and breathe. That's all I do. You know, and that's probably the most interesting thing about him in his entire life, to be completely honest.
Until it wasn't.
Until it wasn't. So
don't foreshadow.
John's entire time in Europe consisted of 34 days. He was there for 34 days and was sent back home because the war was over. The Nazis surrendered. Well, the war wasn't over. Japan was still raging, but the Nazis surrendered. So they just sent John back home because him and his group were in the Pacific theater, or not Pacific, the European theater, and they just sent him back home. And so John decides that he wants to take advantage of the GI Bill when he gets back home. He wants to go to college because, you know, I'm graduated high school. You know, I don't necessarily want to be in the military my entire life. I just want to be able to do something and be normal and live a normal life.
Is long enough. Let's go to college.
So he didn't know what he wanted to pursue, but his mom kept urging him to pursue accounting. She was like, you know, you probably get to be a good accountant. And so he does, you know, like he always does. He obeys his mother like a good little boy, and he goes to college and becomes an accountant. He enrolls in the University of Michigan and gets an accounting degree. Now,
wow, she must have had, I mean, she must have had some type of hold over him.
She did.
Sort.
I mean, I think she was the only one that was really giving him love and affection in the home because his dad wasn't. You know,
that's what I'm saying. Whether it was a good hold or a bad hold, I mean, she has something over him for him to just be like, oh yeah, you're right, I could be an accountant. I'll go. You know. Yeah,
and he just does it without arguing, without making waves. I mean, I think maybe he agreed or maybe he didn't. You'd never know because he just wouldn't tell you. He just bottled all that up, pushes it down. You know, I'm just gonna do what mother says. Let me go. So he goes to school. He goes to University of Michigan. He enrolls to get his accounting degree, and he finds that he absolutely loves accounting when he gets there. I mean, it was the right choice. You know, he loves the numbers and loves dealing with, you know, all the minutia and the boringness of dealing with all the accounting stuff. And
it's right into that field.
Yeah, fits right in. Puzzle piece right into that field. And he didn't have much of a social life at all.
You don't say.
Shocker.
But he writes his mom every week and tells her all these stories about all the antics that him and his friends got up to at college and makes up names for people and makes up all these stories and sends her letters. And she just reads all these letters, you know.
Oh, wait. So he makes it up.
Yes. He makes up everything.
He's sending his mama's letters, but he's inventing everything on the page.
Yes, he's inventing all the friends that he's made, and he'll never guess what Barry did last Tuesday. Oh, that Barry, like. So, and his mom is reading all this thinking he's having this exciting life in college. But every weekend, she would take the 3-hour bus ride up to the University of Michigan and go visit her son and stay in his dorm room with him and never meet any of these people because they didn't exist. He just made all these people up. So more often than not, when she would go up, they would find quiet spots on campus to sit down together and read the Bible together. Man, what an exciting college life, eh?
I mean, yeah.
I got a story about mothers who follow their sons to college, but that's for Patreon.
We'll have to tell that story next time.
It's not me, y'all.
We're just going to be real clear on that real quick.
It's not me.
So after about 4 years of college, in his senior year, John tries to get social. He tries to put himself out there, and he even joins a fraternity. He joins Delta Sigma Pi in his senior year, but despite his best efforts, he never seems to fit in or make any friends. I mean, his frat brothers, when asked about him, said that he was rather unremarkable, and they don't really remember him.
Again, he finds a way to become invisible.
Yep. And he goes through his last year of college without making a single friend. And then he graduates with a bachelor's in business and accounting in 1950 and became a junior auditor with a firm in Detroit. And his mom is through the roof about this. She is so very proud. Her son went to college and he graduated. And now he is this qualified public accountant. And she's absolutely elated. And he works at this place for a little bit. But then later on that year, war again breaks out. The Korean War this time. And so John, again, feels the need to serve. And he joins back up with the Army. And this time he's stationed at Fort Eustis in Virginia. Now, when John gets here, John actually begins to thrive and have a pretty good life when he gets to Virginia. He is able to engage in a few hobbies that he had. He loved going to visit Civil War battlefields. And because he was actually a really big history buff. And there's if you go to Virginia, there's Civil War battlefields. You throw a stone, you'll find one.
Yeah.
And, he would go to different places and read historical documents. And he was just absolutely loving this. And he actually ends up attending church functions and was able to make a few friends during this time while he was in Virginia. So his life is going pretty good at this point.
Until?
He makes a good buddy. And in 1951, John and his buddy, there was a guy named Ted. I can't remember his last name off the top of my head, but Ted decided that him and John should go bowling. And John and Ted, they decide they're going to go bowling at this bowling alley that had been set up in the basement of this Lutheran college because they set up this bowling alley because they didn't want young Christians to be tempted by all of the booze and all of the sin of the actual bowling alley. So they set up this Christian bowling alley in the basement of the Lutheran college. And while they're bowling, they notice there are two women in the lane next to them kind of giving them the eyes. And the two women are badly bowling on purpose to the point where John and his buddy walk over and introduce themselves. And this is where John meets a woman who would be his wife in the very near future, and her name was Helen. Now, this seems like a match made in heaven, right? They met in the basement of a church bowling alley, and they're both highly religious. And now but it's not, because Helen actually has a few problems of her own before she meets John. So
she's the one on the left in the photo, by the way.
Yes. So when Helen and John meet, Helen has actually just left. I think the day before her fiance was buried. He died in the Korean War. Not her fiance, her ex-husband. I'm sorry. Her ex-husband had died in the Korean War. And Helen, her story is that she was physically abused her entire childhood. So she married a man named Marvin Taylor to get away. And Marvin Taylor was in the military. And Marvin was shipped off to defend his country in World War II. And as soon as Marvin is shipped off, Helen finds out that she's pregnant with a daughter. And she gives birth to this daughter in 1942. Her daughter's name is Brenda. And while she's in labor, a doctor accidentally splashed ether into Helen's eyes. and it caused the muscles in her eyes to kind of relax. And if you look at pictures of Helen List, she's pretty cross-eyed, like, because her eyes would just, because the muscles were messed up because the doctor had splashed ether in there.
Wow.
And yeah. And while her husband Marvin is in the military, he gets transferred to Korea in 1947. And while he's in Korea, Marvin contracts syphilis and then brings it home to Helen. And Helen
Marvin
immediately...
must not have been being a good Christian while he was over in Korea.
Marvin was not.
Marvin was not. Yeah, Marvin was not. But the weird thing about Marvin that we'll see later on is she kind of idolized Marvin and like held him up on a pedestal, and she would often compare.
Marvin saved her from an. So I already see a absolute dichotomy here. She comes from a very overly emotional, abusive situation, and he comes from a very quiet, very stoic, very reserved. Yeah, I can already see a problem coming here.
Well, Marvin comes home and brings home this to Helen, right? And she shows symptoms immediately, but she couldn't get the treatment in time. And the syphilis that she would have till the day that she died.
Ooh, we know what happened with syphilis. Syphilis make you crazy
when it's untreated. Yeah,
it slowly ate at her brain until the day she died, and we'll see. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Now, Helen's first husband, Marvin, like I said, he had died in Korea, trying to save his unit, and he had been buried. I think it was the day before, or maybe a week before, but he had been, it took a long time for the body to get over. He had died months prior. So Helen was dating several dudes, but for about 8 months, her daughter said that Helen would date guys just looking for anyone to kind of grab onto since Marvin was gone.
She felt lost. Yeah.
Yeah. She felt absolutely lost.
Her stabilizer and her protector was gone.
Yeah. And then she meets John, and John is this like easygoing, steady, guy, and he is the safest option that she can find, so she really latches on to John. Now, John and Helen began dating, and Helen tells John of her rough past, but John doesn't care. John loves Helen, and they fall head over heels for each other. And this is John's first relationship, like his first relationship. He hasn't really had anybody like Helen before now, and the relationship began moving very fast. Now, John preferred to keep it slow and to keep it moving at like a normal pace because this was his first time. He didn't really know how to react to Helen, wanting to be fast. And eventually, he relents to Helen's advances, and they begin having sex with each other. Now, John didn't know this, but Helen, in her mind, was already making wedding plans. And John, like I said, he wanted to take things slow. This is the first time he's really been with anybody like this. But Helen wanted to move it along at a jackrabbit's pace. And Helen was going to get what she wanted come hell or high water. So shortly after they began having sex, she decides she's going to move the relationship even further forward. And she comes up with a lie. And she tells John that she was pregnant. And because she wants to get John. She wants to get her hooks in John, and she wants to hold John down. She wants to lock John down because this is stable. This is good. I'm not going to find anybody else that's stable. This is
yeah, let's base our relationship on a lie. That's always a good way to start shit out.
Yeah.
She's one of these. If you're one of those women that do that, what? You're a terrible person. You don't trap people. And if you have to trap them, you ain't going to want them in a little while anyway, because if they don't want you now, they ain't going to want you later. So stop with that.
Yeah, don't build a relationship on a lie, because all it's going to do is going to eat at you, and it's not something good. Just don't do it. And this story, I think you'll see why.
And that concludes Shelley's relationship journeys for tonight.
Not my relationship journey.
No,
advice.
Relationship journey advice. The advice. Relationship advice.
Yeah, don't do that. That's not cool. Don't do that.
No, don't be that person.
So John, at this point, he decides, he's going to be the good Christian boy that he was taught to be when he growed up. When he was growing up. Sorry, my Southern came out.
That good Christian boy was supposed to wait until marriage, so he's already become a heathen.
I was like, damn, Ryan, that Southern accent just slipped right out, didn't
my Southern came out. Hey, sometimes that happens. So John, being the good Christian boy that he was, decides he was going to do the right thing, and he's going to marry Helen. And he marries Helen on December the 1st, 1951, and even adopted her daughter Brenda as his own to raise her.
That's very nice.
Yeah. And it wasn't until after they married that Helen was like, oh, well, this was under false pretenses. I should probably tell him exactly what happened. And she dreaded telling him because it ate at her on the inside.
Yeah, she was going to have to come clean with that lie at some point.
And she actually went and told him that the pregnancy was a lie. But since it was the 50s, John believed in the sanctity of marriage. He did not want to break up with Helen, and he stayed. He didn't complain. And much to her surprise, he actually told her that he was just happy to be married and excited to be married. And he took all those emotions that a normal person would have had, bottled them up, did what he, put him in a little compartment like he was taught to do, and pushes them deep down inside of himself.
He didn't scream. I screamed.
No, they said that,
so wait,
he was.
Remind me again, does he know about the syphilis?
Yeah, because she told him about her past. I mean, he knows, but he didn't care,
So
and I don't think he ever got it.
But she tells the truth, and so now everything's okay?
Yeah, John just went with it. That's just what he did.
In the 50s, divorce was very much frowned upon. I mean, but you know what? If that was me and you trapped me into something, I'm going to harbor a little resentment, and that resentment's going to bubble. I may not say anything right off the bat, but I'm going to have to unpack that luggage at some point.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it gets unpacked. No, don't worry. So they go along to get along. John was just kind of go along to get along. I don't want to make any waves. I don't want any shouting. I just want, I have this perfect little family right now. I want everything to be, I want to keep up appearances. This is the 50s. I have to be very Mr. Traditional. I have to keep up all these appearances. I don't want to make any waves or make anything to do anything to make this go away. So he goes along with it. And in 1954, the war ends, and they move back to Michigan, and he goes back to his old job that he had before he was in the war. And on January the 8th, 1955, they welcome their first daughter, Patricia List, into the world. And this is John and Helen's first daughter together. So I mean, they have
Brenda,
the adopted,
and
they have
Brenda, Patricia,
and now they have Patricia. And John finds a better job in Kalamazoo at the Sutherland Paper Company, and they move. And when they get to Kalamazoo, he and Helen have two more children. They have two boys during their time in Kalamazoo. They have John Jr. and they have Fred List. And things are good.
We're missing a kid in that picture. Where's Brenda? I guess that's Patricia, John, and
well, at this point, and when that picture was taken, which I'm kind of going to get to here in a minute, Brenda may have been gone at that point because Brenda was older.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's my bad. Patricia, John, and who else?
It's Patricia, John, and Fred. Yes, John Jr. and Fred. And
look how cute little Fred is.
Yeah. I mean, they have their little perfect little 1950s family.
Mm-hmm.
And so John, at this point, like I said, things were going good. They were making good money. They were living nice. And John had actually found a good Lutheran church and became the treasurer. And he seemed to have the perfect little family. And everybody went to church every Sunday and sat on the front row of the pew because John was a treasurer and everybody knew who he was. But
that made him important.
There was dissension among the ranks, though, that nobody knew about until it came to a head. Because Helen did not like church. She did not want to go to church. She absolutely, she didn't like the routine of getting up every morning and getting the kids together and having to rush to get everybody primped and proper and get out the door to get to church in the morning because
then she had to come home and make lunch. Oh yeah. That was on her to do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and she wanted to sleep in too. She was just like, I don't do this. I don't want to go anymore.
And she's suffering from syphilis and her brain's getting eat up. And that'd make you tired.
And she decides she's going to quit going. And this is highly offensive to John. But John, okay, fine. Okay. All right. I'll still go to church. You stay here.
So she stayed home?
Bottles it up. Pushes it deep down. And not only that, but Brenda sees Mom don't have to go to church. I ain't going to church either. So Brenda decides to start staying home too. And that not being his biological daughter, John lets that slide, surprisingly.
He just kind of acquiesced, saying, okay,
he
not
was just
really my kids. So,
okay, you go ahead. But as for me and mine, we will continue to go.
Mm-hmm.
So he takes his kids to church, and then people start asking questions. Where's Helen? Where's Brenda? What's going on? John, embarrassed at church every Sunday because his little perfect little family has been shaken. Everybody at the church knows his wife is backslidden.
There's whispers. Yeah.
He continues to go, but he takes all that, bottles it up, pushes it down, never says a word about it.
Because she's basically humiliating him every weekend.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that would be how, if this was something that was very important to me, and the person I was with just flat out refused to even try. Not even a compromise. Like, I'll go once a month. It's not my gig.
Not only that, but the title that he held at the church. I mean, it would almost be expected that your whole family is there.
Absolutely.
And if you have to continually week after week after week, maybe come up with some excuse or explain, that's going to eat at you. Sorry, it's going to eat at anybody.
Absolutely. I mean, and you got to come up with everything every week. So I know excuse every week. And
because he didn't tell them that she had syphilis.
No. And they're talking. I mean, hell, I grew up going to church. I know how them people talk. They're talking about everybody. Well, I wonder why, he's going to church. Well, why isn't his wife going to church? I wonder what's really going on at home.
I feel so sorry for that poor lady. She shows up every week, and her children, oh my God, one's in jail and one's and her husband don't even come. Oh yeah, you hear the whispers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And now by this point, not only has Helen stopped attending church, but her drinking and her depression are getting really, really bad. And
wait, she's a drinker?
Oh, she becomes a hardcore alcoholic. She is a hardcore alcoholic, and she will be because she starts drinking, and she will be a hardcore alcoholic until the day that she dies. And she had become a very hard drinker, and because she just got depressed, and she just didn't want to leave the bed. And she'd become a hardcore drinker, and she was actually even prescribed tranquilizers that didn't mix well with her alcohol. So
you're supposed to take those together.
No. So there were days where she would stay in bed all day and just would not get up. So John has, so now he has, on top of that, he's got to deal with his wife, who is going through an episode that he has to, take care of.
This is wow, that recap on that relationship is kind of fucked up. I mean, start with
they are very, and they're very up and down, as we'll see, because Helen seems to like this thing called money, and whenever she has money coming in, she's fine. But whenever they don't have money coming in, she tends to not be fine.
So she spends money, and that makes her feel better. It makes her feel like she's worth something to have some money in her hand and go and purchase something, whether she needs it or not. Okay.
Yeah. So
she does a lot of retail therapy, is what you're saying.
She does. And, there's nothing wrong with that. Hey, I do it myself.
I do too.
I can't afford real therapy. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I mean, sometimes you go out and buy something. You're like, okay,
you do feel a little better. Yeah,
you feel a little bit better. But I mean, and this is the 1950s too. And mental health services are not where they need to be because, like I just said, they just gave her, here's tranquilizers, deal with it. So Helen is a bit at fault in some of the things that happen in their marriage, but she's also dealing with an issue that no one really knew how to help in that particular time period.
Right.
So she would be in bed all day, and she had this very expensive playpen that her and John bought. And this playpen was top of the line. And that's something about Helen too. Everything that they had to have was very top of the line. We have to have the biggest, the baddest, and the best. Because we have to keep up appearances, because the neighbors cannot know that we don't have as much as they think we have. So they buy
to keep up with the Joneses, in other words.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And they buy this very expensive playpen, and they put the playpen she would put the playpen in the driveway with her kids in the playpen, leave them unattended, and go inside and drink. And John would come home from work to find this, and he would find the kids being unattended with Helen, drunk or in bed. And he would have to pick them up and change them, and he'd have to go make dinner, and he'd have to clean up the home because Helen was incapacitated. And he never said a word. He just did what, his duties as a husband. He pushed all of his emotions down, never said anything. Now, on top of this, Helen also begins to resent John because John does go to church, and John does spend a lot of time with the church and spend a lot of time at work.
Is John superior to her, or she might feel that way?
Well, I don't think John ever said anything. I mean, maybe he still felt that way.
Oh, but there's been those people that are around you that they don't say they're superior to you, but they just kind of give you that look.
Oh yeah. And I don't doubt that he probably felt that way because of the way he felt about the other children when he was a kid, but he never said anything to Helen. But I think Helen kind of secretly knew. So she begins to resent John because he spends so much time with the church, and spend so much time working. And she would get drunk and actually harangue him for being a, quote, goody two shoes all the time. And she would also constantly compare John to her husband. Like I said, you're not like him. He was more of a man than you'll ever be, and blah, 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 blah. So
she's lashing out at him.
Mm-hmm. And then not only would she do that, but she would call him at work and demand he come home and help with the children while she was incapacitated sometimes, and would say things like, your son had an accident, and if you want him changed, I suggest you come home and do it. So he would have to go to his bosses, humiliated, and be like, hey, the little woman's at home having a problem. I got to go home and take care of her. I'll be right back. And the bosses would be like, okay, but they were secretly talking about him, and he took all this.
Sounds like he's making an effort to be a good father, though.
Yeah, he's making an effort, and he's trying, but no matter what he does, it doesn't seem to be good enough. And but she's also dealing with a lot of mental illness. It's not necessarily her fault. It's not good that she's doing this. I mean, it is and isn't her fault at the same time. You know what I mean?
Well, she's self-medicating. She had issues,
but she was doing nothing to fix the situation.
No,
either.
And like I said, mental health was not where it needed to be, and
that's all they knew how to do back then was self-medicate.
Yeah, was self-medicate.
I mean, back then, they still lock them up in the attic if they didn't look right, being like, "Oh yeah, we don't talk about cousin Jimmy. Cousin Jimmy, we don't know where he went." Then you're, never mind. That's just Jimmy. He likes to play up there.
I mean, they would lock somebody away.
Yeah.
And now, if Helen were in the modern world, I think she could have gotten the help that she needed, and maybe none of this would have happened. But, who knows? I mean,
but it sounds like Helen had a bit of a vicious streak in her.
Vindictive.
Because, if you're going to compare me to whoever you're with before, why don't you just go be with them? I ain't got time for this shit.
Yeah. And it's like, and John was the one.
Vicious and undermining, and that is designed to eat at your self-value and your self-worth and your confidence in the relationship. That's what that's designed for, to pick and pick and pick. So so she's already having all these problems, and then she's picking at the person who's
and John is like the one that swooped in and saved her, basically. Like, she's the she kind of made him do so, but he's, like your ex-husband was dead, and, here I am trying to take care of you, and it's not good enough, and I think he's probably dealing with some of that too. But once again, she's sick. She can't really help what she's doing, like she's not all there.
Yeah. It's a really tough and hard line to kind of walk, because mental health was not where it is today. We still have issues with it today, but it was 10 times worse back then. People, that's all they knew was how to self-medicate. Nobody really knew exactly the way to turn. So it's kind of like, she's doing it to herself, but she doesn't know another direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, she's damned if she does and damned if she doesn't. You know? It's either I don't self-medicate and have to deal with this, or I self-medicate and then I'm this way.
So she's kind of screwed either way,
Not to take any fault away from her, No. I mean, but she's got a vindictive streak on her, but
she's got a lot going on.
Yeah.
But not only does she, so John would go to his bosses and he would be like, "Hey, I gotta go home," and he would go home and take care of it, come back humiliated because his wife, John's wife's calling again. What's going on this time? And on top of this, she also begins to bully him about his appearance and his haircut and calls it old-fashioned and stupid. And
she's just being mean at that point.
She's just being mean, absolutely being mean to him. And John never says a word about it. Just takes the abuse, pushes it down.
Well, if you think about it, that's very similar to what his father did to him. Boy.
Absolutely. The boy, absolutely. Now, Brenda, her daughter, is absolutely miserable at this point. She's a teenager, and she's like, I have got to get the fuck out of here. Get me out of here. So Brenda was so miserable, she marries somebody just to leave. And leaves.
Kind of like her mother did.
She gone. Brenda's gone and does not factor into the story anymore. She left. Bye. She is off on her own. She leaves because she can't stay in this environment. So, shortly after Brenda leaves, John loses his job at the paper company because on October the 8th, 1959, his company merges with another, and John is let go because they realize he's not the employee that they thought he was. Like, he's just not meeting up to standards that the company wants. But John didn't want to go on unemployment or welfare because, that was against his religion. He couldn't do that. That was sinful. Like
that's charity.
That is charity. Yeah. That is the wrath of God coming down upon John.
Mm-hmm.
So John like begs and begs and begs. And his bosses were nice enough to let him stay until he found another job. They're like, okay, stay till you find another job, but you're not going to be working here. Try to find one as quick as you possibly can.
Hurry up. Yeah.
And it actually takes him quite some time to find another job. And he eventually finds one working for Xerox in 1961. And so his family has to move to go work so he can go work for Xerox. Now, he gets offered a 6-figure salary to go do this.
Wow, that's huge money.
Yeah. And he and his family moved to New York and actually are able to move into their very own home for the first time. And John was making enough money to afford the finer things in life. And while he was making this amount of money, guess who was very happy? Helen.
Of course she was.
Helen was extremely happy because he was able to afford expensive presents for her. And he was able to afford a babysitter, and they could go out to eat and they could go do things. And, it actually ended up rekindling their dead romance because John was able to buy, spend. They actually went on a trip to Europe. They do all kinds of stuff. And John is happy because, things seem to be looking up, but he secretly in the back of his mind is secretly kind of bothered by the fact that Helen seems to be happy when he has the monetary means to make her happy, but whenever he doesn't have money, she's not. So
he's not a dumb man. He's a boring man.
Right.
Exactly. And that eats at the back of his mind. But with Helen being happy, she was enjoying her new social status. She told her sister that people treated them differently because of the money that they were making now. And she decides, you know what? I'll start going to church again. So she starts going to church again with John and the family.
That's a way to show off.
Mm-hmm. But she continues to booze heavily while she's doing all this and attending church. And so John, while he is working for Xerox, he's not like super high up in the company, but he's high up enough to where like he's a respected person in the company, and he gets to invite his wife to the Christmas party. And so that year, Helen comes to the Christmas party and he brings her. So, she got absolutely sloshed at the Christmas party and openly flirted with other men in front of him at the Christmas party.
Party
yes.
foul.
And told everyone at the party that John could not live up to the standards of her first husband.
Oh, like, now she's trash talking.
And John just takes it, gets her in the car, drives home red-faced and angry, but doesn't say a word to her.
I think I'd have had to say something.
And gets her to the house. And this is the first time this happens, but the whole time he is employed at Xerox and there's any kind of employee function with family, she would repeat it every time. And so he would continually...
He kept taking her?
Yeah, at least
I would have learned my lesson.
No, I'd have been like, look, bitch, you staying home.
So
on the couch.
Every employee function that they had, Helen would get absolutely sloshed. But here's the thing about it though, is some of the people that worked for Xerox that knew Helen actually really liked Helen. But she would come to the party and they said she was actually a very fun person to talk to and could talk about different things.
Fucking plastered.
Yeah. And they said, that John wouldn't talk about really anything, but Helen would talk about whatever. So maybe it's a little bit of column A, column B, because John felt like he was being slighted. Maybe he was somewhat, but not as much as he thought, and maybe Helen wasn't as drunk as he made her out to be. Do you know what I mean? So,
maybe he was upset that she could garner the attention and be the center of attention.
Yeah.
And maybe he was jealous of that in some way.
I mean, hell, after a fifth of Fireball, I'm also the center of attention. So, I mean, shit.
But in 1965, things began to slow down at Xerox, and they're able to take kind of an audit of all their employees. And by that point, John was the director of accounting services, and they found that John was not as promising of an employee. And this continues to happen to John. Like, he'll get like these positions and just continue to lose them for whatever reason because he's not good at managing. He can't manage.
He doesn't have people skills.
No. And they said he was terrible at managing and couldn't speak to his employees that well. So they go to John and they're like, look, you're in this position, but this is as far as you're going. You're not going to go anywhere else in this company. This is where you're going to stay. Sorry. And so John, humiliated because he wants to keep on moving up the corporate ladder, he decides he's going to go look for another job, right? And on top of this, Helen is getting sicker and sicker. And she goes to the hospital because one night she has a blackout drunk. Take her to the hospital, and they find out that she has begun suffering from cerebral atrophy, where her brain has literally shrunk because of the boozing, because of the pills, because of the syphilis.
The syphilis too, yeah.
And so John is like, realizes, I need money fast. I have got to do something. And, I think his sister actually, Helen's sister talked to John one day and actually suggested that he go on some sort of assistance program to order to have like a live-in nurse come and stay with Helen. And John just absolutely would not have that. No, I'm not
She
doing
didn't
that.
know her brother-in-law very well, did she?
No, not really.
It's
I mean,
not gonna happen.
they would come over every now and again, but they just knew he was just kind of a strange, odd duck, and they just didn't really have much to do with him. So John begins looking for another position, and he finds a very good position. He begins working as the vice president of the National Bank of Jersey City. And John would be making more money than he had ever made in his entire life. And they said his salary was probably about $25,000 a year. And in 1960, money, that's some good money. And he is making a shit ton of money. And so the family has to move from where they are in New York. They have to move to Westfield, New Jersey. And he begins looking for a home that, can accommodate his kids and Helen. His Helen's getting sicker, and he's going to have to do what he has to do to take care of Helen. And he was looking for a home in about the $20,000 to $1,000 range. But Helen insisted that she wanted something elegant, and he better find it. So John does find a home that is elegant, and he and Helen settle on this home called Breeze Knoll in New Jersey. Now, Breeze Knoll is that mansion right there, and it's set on 22 acres of land.
Jesus.
It was built in 1825, had hardwood oak floors, 19 rooms, 5 bathrooms, 10 fireplaces, and cost them $57,000. And it had a ballroom with a stained glass skylight in it. Now, what their plan was is they were going to buy this place and restore it to its former glory. But it ends up needing a lot more repairs than what they are prepared to deal with, and ends up becoming a money pit for John. He is underneath this thing, and he can't get out from underneath this thing. So he puts down a down payment, and then he starts to realize that he's not going to be able to make payments on this place unless he has some money fast. So he goes to his mother, and he borrows $10,000 from his mom. And his mom says, I'll give you the $10,000 to help you pay on part of this home. But the stipulation is I have to come and live with you. And so, but damn, the house, it's only 5 of them, and God, 19 rooms. She's going to have plenty of space to be on her own and run
Mama
around,
can have her own wing.
Exactly.
Yeah, for real.
So he takes the money, and she comes to live with him. Now, Helen hated the idea of Alma coming to live with them. But she loved the home
because
so
Alma
much.
probably wasn't going to let her get away with talking to her little boy like that.
Yeah.
No. But she loved the home so much that she agrees, and Alma moves in to the home that would eventually become her grave. So when they move into this house, the neighbors decide they want to come over and meet the List. Hey, this new family moves into the neighborhood. We're going to come say hello. And there was a guy named Henry Delvin who brought over a pie. Hey, welcome to the neighborhood.
Nice.
Well, John meets him at the door, tells him that it is not their custom to associate with neighbors, takes the pie out of his hand, and closes the door in his face. And so,
okay, that's funny.
Look, yeah. I'm not gonna lie. I don't fault him for that, because if you don't let me know that you're coming over before you ring my doorbell, I'm gonna do that drop down real quick, crawl to the window real fast, and be
do the hunt Jehovah's Witness stance.
Exactly. Like, yeah, exactly.
And then go, nope, ain't answering that.
You can't trick me with your pie, Wily Weasel.
You might be able to for me, but anyways.
I don't know. If it's an apple pie, I'm your man. Bring over some vanilla ice cream on top of that too. Oh, we'll talk all afternoon.
So my daddy's fried apple pies. You'd open up the door for me?
Oh, hell yes. So John gets a reputation now because neighbors are like, that's a weird fucker that lives down there. Like he shut the door and he shut the door in his face and took his damn pie. So the neighbors began to talk, and but they would still try to be friendly to John. They would like walk over to like say hello, and he would, and he would turn around and walk the other direction. You know, he'd be driving down the road to go home. People throw their hands up, and he'd look the other way. You know, and
well, damn,
he just wouldn't talk to him, and
he
so
had no people skills whatsoever, none, and didn't want to.
Absolutely none. And on top
he wasn't
of that,
allowed to associate when he was little. Why would he associate when he's grown?
And you know, and on top of this fool would go outside in the front yard and mow the grass wearing a full damn suit, because all he would wear was a suit every time, every day. John would get up, wear suit, tie, every day. And this fool would go outside and do yard work in the middle of the summertime wearing a suit and tie. So the people were just like, they're weird, and he's kind of an asshole. I don't want to deal with them. So they kind of further isolated themselves from everybody in the neighborhood. So, and John wanted it that way. He didn't want to talk to these damn people. You know, he just wants to do his thing and wants people to leave him alone. So he was deemed the uptight weirdo on the block, and people just said, "No, we ain't dealing with this guy." And
man, that's a title I aspire to.
Yeah.
The uptight weirdo on the block. Yes.
But you're not uptight.
No, I'm not uptight. Although I'm kind of the weirdo, because we're the only one that really decorates big time for Halloween out here. And we have zombie babies hanging from your trees.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Anyways.
I fucking love that. Well, you know, with them moving into this home, there's not a whole lot of money for extras, because they're trying to take all this money and put. I mean, Helen wanted this house now, but she's the one that is having to deal with the repercussions of not having money anymore. And she becomes depressed again because of lack of funds. And she stops attending church with John again. And it even asked John this time to take me off the church registry. I don't want to be on the registry anymore. I'm really not going back this time. So John, horrified, does as he is asked, but then begins openly talking with certain members of the congregation about how he feels his family is falling away from God. And when it comes to John, that is a very, very serious offense. And so right after this, 1 year after he gets a job at the bank, John is fired again. And so he loses his job.
Damn.
But no one knows, because John would get up. He would still get up and get dressed for work, go down to the train station to take the train into the city, would go down to the next train stop, open up the paper, sit there all day and read a paper, or read a book, and was secretly draining his mother's bank account to keep up the appearance that he was actually bringing in a paycheck, because you can only keep up that ruse for so long.
Oh yeah.
You know, if you can pretend you're going to work all day long, but when it comes time for payday and you ain't got the money to pay the rent, somebody's going to start asking some questions. So
why did he feel like he had to hide it? Why didn't he just come in and say, I got fired, I've got to go find another job?
Well, I think it was another one of those, you know, keep up appearances thing. You're incurring the wrath of God because you lost your job. You have failed as a man. So if you tell someone about it, then people are going to look at you differently. So I think maybe he just did it. He kept it to himself because he didn't want people to worry. And he just, part of his upbringing. I think that's why he didn't.
I think it's a mixture of his upbringing, but I think at the same time as we just reacted to like, holy crap, again. I mean, he's having to go back again to his family. And
I think it's a pride thing.
The way that I was going to say, the way that he's brought up and the way that he is still, for him to have to say one more time, I got fired, is probably in his mind, I am failing yet again as a man.
Because you got to remember, in that time frame, I mean, that was the time frame of the gold watch. You know, you started at a business, you worked at that business until you retired and you got your gold watch for your X number of years of service. That was the gold watch era. And people didn't usually leave jobs and job hop unless they had to move for some reason or something like that.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's...
But think about this, too.
It's a pride thing, though.
It's a pride thing, and he's underneath this house that he cannot get out from underneath of. I mean, he is shackled to this thing, you know.
And imagine trying to tell your wife, who you know is happy when you have money and sad when you don't have money, that, hey, I've lost my job again.
And she belittles you and degrades you and runs you down. And he could probably just hear, oh, well, my first husband wouldn't have lost his job.
Yep. That's probably exactly what would have happened. And she probably would have,
because she did have a bit of a nasty streak.
Yeah, she did. And John does this for a while, but eventually he gets a job as the VP of the American Photograph Company in New York City. but it's only half of what he was making at the bank. So he still has to kind of supplement that income a little bit. And he's still kind of taking from his mom's bank account ever so slightly. She don't realize it, because he, my son's an accountant. He's handling all the money. I don't realize, you handle it.
She's not even looking at it.
No, she's not even touching it. She's not even looking at it. So John is only making about $12,000 a year with this, but after about a year working at that company, the company decides to relocate, and John loses his job again because he can't relocate. He is shackled to this money pit that his wife just had to have. So it's not looking good for John. It's not looking good for the whole family. But like John has taken on all of this, has taken on all this burden too, because his family doesn't really know anything about it. So he's under all this pressure, this constant pressure that no one else knows about. And to keep up with appearances, to keep his family, close to God, to keep his wife happy, to keep his family, to keep his house. And he just is in this financial hole that keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And he just doesn't know how to get out of it. Well, on top of this, Helen's demands are getting more and more. And Helen demanded that the children be dressed in the most expensive clothes. And, they need to have the biggest and the baddest and the baddest and the best of everything. And John, in order to keep Helen happy and to keep her off of him, continues to buy her expensive gifts and trying to pull her out of her depression. And so he keeps getting further and further and further down that hole. And he begins to lose control on everything in his life, except his children. His children are the only thing that he can control. So John begins to drill them on Bible verses and drill them on Bible teachings and making their schedules and making them like, you have to do this at this particular time. And, and he just is losing it. He's falling further into madness. He's descending into madness at this point because he can't have control over anything. And the only things he can control are the people that are his biological children. And lucky for them, and not so lucky for John, Helen gets a bit sicker. So John kind of backs off on the kids. So he's going to focus all of his attention on his wife. And so his kids at this point, they are teenagers and they're starting to be their own people. So lucky for them, now they can kind of do some of that. And as a matter of fact, John's daughter, Patty, becomes involved in theater classes in 1970. And begins
she gets to express herself.
Yeah.
And
she gets to express herself and finds an artistic outlet, because God, if all this is going on at home, God knows those kids need an outlet.
Mm-hmm.
And John didn't forbid her from doing it because he's focusing on Helen, who was getting sicker and sicker at the moment. But he hated the fact that she was in drama club. He said that drama was a field for the devil and that actors were agents of the devil. But,
shit. Okay.
Hey.
and we all theater kids.
007, baby.
I'm like, you're looking at three theater kids right on the screen right now.
Mm-hmm. And, she also begins doing what teenagers do to kind of be rebellious against her father. She starts saying, and then this is also the 1970s, and at this point, coming out of the 60s, and she starts telling people that she was only going to church because she had to go to church because her dad made her to go to church. As a matter of fact, she was actually
a teenager.
Yeah. And she's like, as a matter of fact, she's actually a witch, and she was trying to get people to join her coven.
That. Oh yeah, she's being a little shit just to be a little shit.
Yeah.
And her and I would have been best friends.
And and John, and she's doing just to spite John. She doesn't believe any of this shit she's saying. She's just being a rebellious teenager. And John catches wind of this, and John doesn't say anything. But John begins to really fear for his family, because he's like, see, I let her go out into the world, and look at her now. She is hanging out and consorting with the devil, and he begins to descend further and further into madness. And as a matter of fact, John, before he does what he does to his family, does have a violent outburst. And it was the only violent outburst that his family had ever seen him have. And it scared the crap out of them, because shortly after she got into drama classes, she comes downstairs one day, and she is wearing a shirt that says "Make Love, Not War." And this is highly offensive to John. John sees this, and him being like the staunch, stick in the mud, conservative. I am.
And he's not going to put up with them damn hippies. None of this make love, not war. Those dirty hippies.
And he sees this and he demands she go upstairs and change immediately. And she refuses to do so. And he actually grabs her and throws her against the wall and pushes her against the wall, calls her a slut several times, and rips the shirt off of her and sends her to her room.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then he retreated into his office, slams the door, and starts blasting classical music in his office so no one can come in there and disturb him.
That's what I'm going to do next time I get pissed.
Yeah. He probably was quite ashamed of himself for losing control.
Mm-hmm. That's probably exactly what it was. He had never lost control before.
He probably wasn't angry about what he did to her because he probably thought that, you know what? Mm-hmm. That's what needed to happen because she's out of control. But he was probably mad at himself for losing control. He's probably more angry with himself than he was with his actions.
He probably was.
And take that flower out of your hair too.
I'm serious. So the next time I get into a big old fight, I'm just going to walk into a room, slam the door, and just hit the power on the stereo and just hear
I'll kick that door open and go, what
I just imagine John List standing in the window of his office as like the beam of light from the moon comes in as he's staring out holding a snifter of scotch as Moonlight Sonata plays in the background.
Or you hear dun 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 dun, 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 dun.
And he's just like, my family is falling away from God. I must do something.
He wouldn't have no scotch though, because he wasn't a drinker. That's his wife's job.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know if he was a drinker. He might have snuck him a sniff.
I think I'd have started drinking.
I'd have been a hardcore drinker.
So, but after this incident, him and Patty don't really speak to each other anymore until Patty's death. I wouldn't talk to him
anymore either.
And by that summer, by the summer of 1971. He's starting to feel more financial pressure. He has taken out a second mortgage on his home, and the bills just keep coming in, and he keeps falling further down. And his family is falling away from God. His daughter's hanging out trying to be a witch, and his wife is sick, and he can't get out of this hole. He doesn't have any options, and because of his religion, he can't take any charity. He can't do anything. So he snaps, and he decides, if I kill them and make them go away, and I kill everybody, and I disappear, I can save them from hell, and I can get away from all my financial responsibilities. So,
graphic content warning moving forward.
After all John had to do was get on his knees and ask for forgiveness after he killed them all, and he would be with them in heaven one day. And he would keep his family out of hell, so he began planning the murder of his family in the summer of 1971.
So he didn't snap. This was premeditated.
It was premeditated. It was premeditated, but I would argue that he did snap. That like something had to click in his brain at that point because of all the pressure and because of everything that he thought was falling apart around him. That he had to snap in order to plan this and in order to go through with this. Something had to come loose.
I don't agree. Snap means you do it. It happens. I have no control. He thought that out.
Hang on.
It.
But John is
let's see what he did first.
But John is also a very measured, very meticulous individual. So his snap might be different than you and I snapped.
Snapping.
Now, he begins to plan the murder of his family and begins thinking about this. And I saw that. he begins thinking about this. And in the fall of that year, he sits his 3 children down at the kitchen table. And he tells them they were going to die by his hand very soon. And he asked them, do you want to be buried or cremated? And they're all kind of looking at each other like, y'all are hearing this, right? And
Freddie's like, Daddy's talking crazy.
Yeah. Like
he literally tells them.
Yes. He sits them down at the kitchen table and says he was going to kill them. Do you want to be buried or cremated? And, they knew their father was weird, and they knew that, their father is not a joker. So they're scared. And they told him their answers, like, well, I guess I want to be buried. I guess I want to be cremated. And he goes into his office and shuts his door. Now, Patty is not going to take this line down. So Patty the next day goes to school and goes to drama class. And she tells her drama teacher, hey, my dad is going to kill me. Like, he told me specifically, he is going to kill me and is going to kill my brothers. And the drama teacher's like, oh, that's crazy. Oh, yeah. And he's thinking it's just like, a teenage girl.
A dramatic teenage girl.
just saying, just like, because they're in drama class, and he thinks he's like, okay, all right. And
it's not that bad. Come on.
No, he doesn't take
her.
Yeah.
He doesn't take her serious. But that night he drives her home, and her brother, John Jr., comes out to the car and keeps talking and comes out and talks to the drama teacher and is like, hey, you're welcome here anytime you want to come here, right? No, really. You're welcome anytime you want to come here. Anytime you want to drop by. And I mean, anytime, you are more than welcome to drop by. Like, basically, like, everything's short of blinking SOS with his damn eyeballs,
Yeah, yeah.
And, the teacher said that he got goosebumps, but was just kind of like, okay,
but
these people
nothing?
Did absolutely nothing. Did nothing. Didn't say anything. And he was just kind of like, oh, okay, that's just kind of weird. So he leaves. And he says as he pulls out of the driveway, he sees John List standing in one of the windows of the house with his arms behind his back, glaring at him from one of the windows. But nonetheless, he doesn't do anything. He just lets it ride. And the one adult that Patty trusted to tell her what was happening ignored her and doomed her to her death. Because John surmises he's going to kill his family. And he decided he was going to do it on All Saints Day, November the 1st of 1971. But for some reason or another, he pushes it back to November the 8th. And he plans everything meticulously to a point. He planned to kill every one of his family members throughout the day, as their arrival times home would be staggered. So he could kill one and clean up and, throughout the day, keep doing that until all of his family members
Now, wait a
were
minute.
dead.
He still has a job at this point, right? Even though it's only paid in half, he still has a job.
So at this point...
is he going to call in sick?
Well, we'll get to that. Because at this point, he had just gotten a job, because he had lost... He was in between jobs for such a long time, and he had just gotten a job working for an insurance company in the area. And we'll kind of get to that in a second.
Okay.
And so he decides that he's going to kill them all throughout the day, and he's going to stack them all in the ballroom, lay them all out, and he is going to disappear into the wind. And no one's ever going to find him. So he puts his plan into action. Now, when I say when he was meticulous, I mean meticulous. Like, he actually called the paper a few days before November the 8th to tell them to stop delivering papers to his house. Because if there's a bunch of papers on the front porch, the neighbor's going to get suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
But the paper still comes the morning of November the 8th, and John's kind of pissed off about it, but he goes outside, he grabs the paper, and he reads the paper about everything going on in the news that day, and he realizes that it is the right decision to kill his family, because look at this world. This world is so bad, and it's going to hell, and I have to keep them out of hell, and I'm going to kill them. So John then writes a note to the milkman, puts it on the door to tell the milkman that they were going on a very long extended trip to stop delivery to the home until further notice, because you don't want milk and cheese piling up outside because people are like, what the fuck? He ain't picked up his cheese, And so the milkman reads it. He's like, okay, cool. Stop order. I'm not going to come back by for a while. And John wakes his children up, gets them off to school, and waits for his wife to come down and make her morning coffee. Now, Helen comes down in her pajamas that morning and makes her coffee. And John hated the fact that Helen walked around the house in her pajamas, because it was slovenly to John, and John did not like that. She should have been up and dressed and ready to do whatever the day had held for her. Even though she's sick and she's staying at home, she ain't doing nothing. She's going to stay at home. John that was just one of those things that John hated. And as she was walking around in her PJs and made her coffee, she made her coffee and sat down at the table. John walked up behind her, pulls his .22 caliber pistol, and points it at the back of his wife's head. Now, she must have sensed that someone was standing behind her, because she turned around ever so slightly, and John pulls the trigger and shoots his wife in the jaw. But the shot doesn't kill her, so he shoots her several more times until she stops breathing. And then he realizes that Mom is still in the house. I bet Mom heard this commotion. So John runs up the stairs to where his mother is in another kitchen in their home with 19 rooms, and she's making her coffee that morning. And his mother asks him, what was that noise? And John said, I'm not sure. I just came upstairs to check on you. And as she sipped her coffee and looked out the window, John again pulls his pistol. And as she's looking out the window, she's trying to see if maybe the sound that she heard earlier had came from outside, looking to see if there was something outside. John silently approaches with his pistol, and she turned around and he shot her right above the right eye at point blank range, blowing her brains out all over that kitchen. John had originally planned to drag his mother and put her into the ballroom in his original plan, but she was so heavy that John couldn't drag her that far, so he rolled her up in a carpet and put her in a closet in the hallway. So
that's your mama.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. But I mean, at this point, he don't care. He's saving her from hell too. She's also falling away from God. I'm saving her from poverty and hell. So he shoots her, rolls her up in a carpet, crams her in a closet, and goes downstairs to clean up the mess he left by killing Helen. So John drags Helen to the ballroom, leaving a long, large trail of blood throughout the home. And he rolls out a series of sleeping bags and lays Helen face down on top of one of them and covers Helen in her bathrobe and towels. And then he does his best to clean up the trail with paper towels and newspapers that he had lying around the house in order to clean up that trail of blood. And John goes into he and Helen's bedroom and starts wiping his hands profusely all over the bed sheets to get the blood off of his hands. And then he runs into the bathroom, puts his hand on the toilet, leaving a bloody handprint, and vomits into the toilet. And crawls into the shower, cleans himself off, puts on one of his patented suits that he would use to do whatever, gets out of there, and realizes, oh shit, I had an appointment with my boss this morning at the insurance company. So John goes downstairs and calls his boss at 10 a.m. And he calls his boss and he tells him that he's not going to make it in today because Helen's mother was sick and he had to make a surprise trip to North Carolina to take care of his mother-in-law, he and his family. So he covers his tracks there. And then he sits down and he writes 3 letters to his children's school telling them that they were going to be out of town for an extended vacation because his mother-in-law was sick, their grandmother was sick, and that's where their children would be, and that's why they would not be attending school. And then he goes outside and he rakes the yard. Just trying to make the yard look nice, I guess. And the neighbors thought it was kind of odd when they see him raking the yard because A, it was a record cold day that day in New Jersey. B, John's outside in his suit again, raking the yard. And C, it's the middle of the workday. Why isn't John at work? He's not one to miss work. But they didn't think anything about it. They didn't want to pry because, once again, John's a neighborhood weirdo. We don't want nothing to do with him, so leave him be. Now, after John rakes the leaves, he goes back inside, and it's about noon, and Patty actually calls the home. And Patty says she's not feeling good and asks if John could come and pick her up from school. So John drives to the school, checks his daughter out, drives his daughter home, and the whole time doesn't say a word to his daughter in the car. He parks in the driveway, gets out of the car, and runs into the house before his daughter gets in there. So his daughter, not suspecting anything, walks into the back door, and John had hid in the laundry room that was to the side. He walks up behind her, sticks the gun to the back of her head, pulls the trigger, blows his daughter's brains out in the foyer right there. Then drags her body and puts it right next to her mother's in the ballroom. And then he cleans up again, gets showered again, puts on another suit, and leaves the house to run some errands. He goes to the bank, cashes a personal check, and then goes to the post office to put a stop order on the mail that was going to come to the house. Once again, not to draw suspicions from the neighbors if the mailbox is full. He mails the letters that he wrote to the kid's school, and then goes to his mother's bank to drain the last bit of her savings account that was only $2,000 that he had sucked from. I mean, there's no telling how big it was before that, but there was only $2,000 left in that bank account.
She had enough at one point to give him $10,000.
Yeah.
In the 50s, 60s.
Mm-hmm. And this money was what John was going to use to go on the lam and disappear with. So John puts that money in his pocket and he goes back home. Now, at about 3 p.m., John's youngest son, Freddie, calls the home and asks John, could you please come pick me up from work? I heard my sister Patty came home from school today sick, and I want to come take care of her, because by all accounts, John was supposed to be like a really sweet kid. And he wanted to, the youngest kid. This is Freddie. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Freddie was a really sweet kid by all accounts, and he wanted to come take care of his sister. He wanted to see if she was okay. So John drives, picks up Freddie, drives back to the house, once again runs inside before his son, and waits in the laundry room. Oh,
little tiny Freddie.
Mm-hmm. Waits in the laundry room for his son. Now, Freddie took a little bit of time to get inside, and he walks in, and he takes off his coat, and while he's in the middle of taking off his coat, John emerges from the laundry room, pistol drawn, and shoots his son in the back of the head.
Oh, my God.
Drags his body into the ballroom and places it next to his sister and his mother on the sleeping bags. Now, John starts cleaning up from killing Freddie, and his plan is almost thwarted because his son, John Jr., he looks out the window and sees John Jr. walking home from school a little bit early. Now, John Jr. was supposed to be at soccer practice that afternoon, but since, like I said, it was a record cold day in November that year, the soccer practice had gotten either canceled or they ended early, but there was a reason that John Jr. had come home a little bit early. Now, John gets into position in the laundry room waiting on his son to walk in, and it's almost as if his son felt like something was wrong, because he almost like kind of apprehensively comes into the back door. And when he walks into the back door, he looks over into the laundry room and he sees his dad holding a gun aimed at him. So he turns around to run, and as he turns around to run, John shoots him in the back. But this doesn't kill him, and he continues to try to get away from John. And he starts crawling to try to get away. And John, trying to kill his son, emptied a clip into his back to kill him until he stops breathing. In total, John shot John Jr. 10 times in order to kill him.
Oh, my God.
And then he drags John Jr. to the ballroom to place him with the rest of the family onto the sleeping bags, cleans up, and stands over the bodies, pleased at what he has done, because he had saved his family from financial ruin and hell. He falls to his knees. He asks the Lord to forgive him, and gets up and goes downstairs and grabs some of his stationery off of his desk that has his name on it. He writes a letter to his priest, to his mother-in-law, and to his aunt, detailing what he did and why he did what he did, justifying what he had done to his family. And chillingly, he wrote to his pastor that while the pastor didn't condone what he'd done, he felt the pastor had understand John did what he did and why he did it. And then he blamed it on God, saying that this must have been what he wanted because God didn't answer any of my prayers. And at the end of his letter, he added, "Mother's in the closet. She was too heavy to move." He takes those letters, locks them in a desk, puts a key on top of the desk for anyone that was going to find it. He goes downstairs, makes himself dinner, and walks around the house, finding every single picture that he was featured in, and removes himself from every single family photo and removes all of his photos from the home, because he felt as if it would be harder for them to catch him if they didn't have a picture of what he looked like. So he goes to sleep that night, has a good night's sleep, gets up the next morning, turns every light in the house on, and turns classical music up loudly over the PA system throughout the house. And then he turns the thermostat down to 50 degrees because it's cold. It's New Jersey. It's the middle of the wintertime. And the bodies are going to start smelling if I leave the heat on. So the neighbors are going to find out. So this would give him more time to put more distance between him and the authorities that were eventually going to come for him. So he leaves and drives his car to JFK International Airport and ditches his car in the long-term parking lot to make it look as if he had fled the country. And for 18 years, the FBI cannot find John List. John List is a ghost after he murders his entire family. Now, the people in the neighborhood began to notice that the lights are on 24/7 at the List property. And notice that the lights are burning out one by one. And this was strange because John was very frugal And they knew that John would not leave lights on like that in his home. But nonetheless, you know, John's neighborhood weirdo, that's the weird family. We ain't going to interfere, whatever. They're doing their thing. But it's actually Patty's friends who take the initiative because they begin to worry about Patty because Patty has not been seen from nor heard from after about a month. And they decide that they're going to go over and see if they can, if Patty's at home. And so they drive over and they knock at the door. Now there's a neighbor across the street who sees these teenagers that are hanging out at this house, like trying to get in. So she calls the police because she's never seen these teenagers before. The police show up and the teens tell them, hey, this is what we were doing. And the cops are like, okay, that is a little weird. And the cops enter the home and there the cops find the grisly scene of all the family laid out in the ballroom. Just shot to death, you know, shot all to hell, placed in the ballroom. And they hear the classical music blaring and they see the lights on. And
okay, I'm gonna pause you real quick because I'm gonna say one more time. Graphic content warning. Shelly, are you okay? Good. Okay. Graphic content warning because we are going to show crime scene photos. So, yeah. Anyways, go ahead.
Now, so the cops go in and they find the grisly scene. And Blake, if you just want to throw up the crime scene photos, I mean, you know, this is, yeah. I mean, these are the crime scene photos that the cops took whenever they go into the List home. And, you know, if you just want to cycle through those, Blake, because I know they're brutal. You know, I mean, I don't care who you are, to be able to meticulously murder your family like that. I mean, I don't care. I mean, obviously he felt like he was saving them, but he wasn't. And I think somewhere deep down in his mind, he knew he wasn't. He knew he was doing wrong. And I hope that it ate at him every day of his life what he had done. But after the police go in and they see all this, they then find his car at the JFK airport, but John is nowhere to be found. So the FBI gets involved. The police call the FBI. They're like, look, we have this guy. He did this to his family. Showed them all the crime scene photos. And the FBI is like, oh, we're going to catch this son of a bitch. But they had no leads because John had disappeared into the wind. For all they knew, he had fled the country because his car was stuck at the JFK lot, long-term parking lot. So they go around to all these pharmacies in the country and they start to put up flyers because John had several ailments that he would have to go to pharmacies to get treated for. And they never got a hit, not one, from any pharmacy anywhere where they put up these. And they even asked the Lutheran Church if they could put up flyers at different Lutheran churches across the country. The Lutheran churches told them absolutely not. So that was another lead that was just dashed. And the FBI looked for him for, like I said, 18 years. No leads, no nothing. Now, mysteriously, 2 years after John List's family dies and he leaves, the mansion that they lived in burns to the ground. And to this day, that has not been solved. Like, no one knows who burned that mansion to the ground. The only thing I can figure is maybe the town probably did it because they didn't want that blemish on their neighborhood or on the town. But to this day, nobody knows.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is where did John List go? What happened to John?
Straight to fucking hell, I hope.
Shit.
So John, after he murders his family, immediately goes to Colorado. And he buys a trailer under the assumed name Robert P. Clark. And anytime anybody asked him from there on out what his name was Bob Clark. And he started living as Bob Clark. He got himself a job working in a kitchen at a Holiday Inn in Colorado. And everyone said he was a friendly and well-liked guy and actually did a really good job in the kitchen. And he worked in kitchens for several years making food. Until in 1977, he returned to his first love of accounting again. He actually started another consulting service, and it was failing. Imagine that. And then he meets a woman who would become his second wife at a Lutheran, it's like a Lutheran, like singles Christian meetup, you know? And her name was Dolores Miller. Now, John went to this meetup and he meets Dolores. And at first she wasn't interested in him at all. She just did not care for John, but he was persistent. And she finally fell for him, and they became a couple, and they dated for years and years and years. And she actually began floating him money to help his failing consulting business for accounting. So the cycle starts all over again.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1985, they finally married, and they moved to a home in Richmond, Virginia. And they moved next door to a woman named Wanda Flannery. Now, Wanda Flannery was one of these women. She was a housewife. You know, she stayed at home, but she was very friendly, and she really liked to make friends with her neighbors, you know, and this goes against everything that John List thinks about neighbors. But as Bob Clark, he had to be a different kind of guy, you know, like he can't let on to anyone that he is, you know, he's John List. So
he reinvented everything about himself.
Mm-hmm.
So she becomes friendly with John and Dolores, and she would come over all the time, and she would always kind of get an off-putting feeling about Bob Clark. She just couldn't quite put her finger on what it was, but she was always like, there's something about this guy. And she would ask him about his past because she was just like generally interested in him. Like, hey, you know, where'd you come from? You know, what's your story? And anytime she would ask, he would be very dismissive and very cold and wouldn't really talk about his past. And so one day, yes, and that really stuck with Wanda. She was like, that's just strange. And so one day, Wanda goes to the supermarket, and she's in line, and she looks to her right, and on the newsstand is a copy of the Weekly World News. Did y'all remember the Weekly World News?
Used to be a trash tabloid. Used to have Bat Boy on it and that kind of stuff. It had Bat
Boy in it. But the Weekly World News had actually ran a story about the List murders in the center of it. She opens it up because, you know, I mean, yeah, it was a trash magazine. It was a great magazine. I fucking loved it. It was a great magazine.
I probably saw the same cover and probably bought that exact magazine that old Wanda saw.
So she opens it up, and she opens up to the center, and there's a giant story about the List murders and talking about exactly what happened and how the FBI had no leads. And there in that magazine is a sketch of what John List would look like today.
An age progression sketch.
And she is looking at this, and all she sees is Bob Clark.
Damn, that's accurate.
That's a different one that we'll talk about in a sec.
They did a forensic,
But they did a really good job. But at the same time, I mean, that's the same idea. You know, they did a composite sketch of what he would look like today. They even said that he would be a religious accountant, and she was just like, "Huh, that sounds like somebody I know." So she goes to Dolores, and she shows Dolores, "Hey, I bought this at the store. This is Bob. Do you know anything about Bob's past? Because this is Bob." And Dolores is kind of like, "Yeah, okay, my husband's whatever," and kind of laughs it off. So a couple of years go by, and things go along as usual. Now, one thing about Bob and Dolores is Bob and Dolores would sit down every Saturday night, and they would watch America's Most Wanted. Bob Clark was a very avid fan of America's Most Wanted. He would not miss an episode. Secretly, he was sitting down to see if his ass would ever be on there every time, because there's, the thing is when someone does some stuff like that, they secretly want recognition for it too. Like they want to try to run from it, but they kind of want like people to know what they've done. And he sat down every Saturday night and watched America's Most Wanted with his wife. Now, Wanda next door also watched America's Most Wanted. And on May the 21st, 1989, America's Most Wanted ran the John List story, complete with that bust that Blake just put up a minute ago that they made of what John List would look like today. And it was the spitting image of Bob Clark, who lived next door. So Dolores, she decides she's going to call the AMW tip line. And
Dolores
she does.
Or Wanda?
Not wife? Dolores, I'm sorry. Wanda.
Good for
There's
Wanda.
a lot of names. Wanda decides she's going to call the AMW tip line. And she's like, "Hey, this is my next door neighbor. I know for a fact this is him. This looks just like him. He lives next door. You know, he's going by the name Bob Clark." And so anyway, the AMW tip line calls the FBI. The FBI began watching. And on June the 1st, 1989, the FBI show up on Bob Clark's doorstep at his job and arrest him. And they're like, "We know you're John List. You're going to jail." and they arrested him. And for a while, he tried to deny that he was John List. And he tried to deny that he had ever, lived in New Jersey. I mean, he would lie. And eventually, they figured out that he was John List. And so John goes to trial in 1990. And his defense tried to say that he had PTSD from the Army and OCD, which caused him to snap and lose his mind and murder his family.
He didn't snap. Mm-hmm. Snapping is immediate. He planned that.
But the jury didn't buy that shit. They were like, nope, this guy knew exactly what he did. This is premeditated murder. He murdered his whole family. And they sentenced his ass to 5 life sentences. And in 2008, John died in prison of pneumonia. Now, here's the kicker of this whole situation. Remember I told you there was a skylight in that mansion? Mm-hmm. In the ballroom? Mm-hmm. Do you know what that skylight was made of? Tiffany glass. And they didn't know. So if he had actually known what he had, their financial troubles would have never been a problem again. So he murdered his entire...
Tiffany glass skylight.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Tiffany glass skylight.
Which had to have been at that point $100. It probably close to $100,000.
I think it was valued at $100,000 if I'm not mistaken. A Tiffany glass skylight.
Because he said you said that the house was built in the 18 somethings.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was a Tiffany skylight replaced at some point, I mean, I can't recall off the top of my head when Tiffany, went into business, but I mean, shit, yeah, that's got to be at least $100,000 right there.
Mm-hmm. That's what they said was valued at $100,000, and he would have never had to worry about it. So he murdered his entire family for absolute no reason. So John List choked on his own phlegm in prison in 2008 and died. And hopefully, he's sitting in hell at the right hand of Satan right now, burning for what he did to his family. And that's his story.
Oh, I know Shelly's got something to say, so I'm just gonna let her start.
I don't even know if I can.
I saw you crying. I know you.
What an awful. This is an awful story, and I could give an F less what one adult does to another. But whenever you bring kids into it, y'all know kids are my weak spot. I got no control over it whenever it comes to somebody doing something to a kid. And was the fucking death penalty not on the table whenever they took him to trial? Because how in the hell did he get off so easy as to be able to live out his life in prison? I don't care that he choked on phlegm. Somebody should have done exactly to him what he did to those kids. There is no punishment that was too great for him. And it's one of those things like, let me in a room with, come at me, bro. You're not going to beat me. You want to pick on little kids?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I'll tangle with you.
I mean, God,
what an awful human.
To sit there and meticulously plan to murder. Like, look, I am not someone that has children. I don't plan on ever having children, I don't think. But even I know, as someone who from the outside, who never having had them, I know how awful it is when something happens to a child, especially your child.
Yeah.
And for someone to do that to their own children is unspeakable.
That is the one thing across any true crime thing that involves somebody with their own kids. I don't get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Shelly, I'm gonna say that I agree on your standpoint on it. This asshole didn't snap. This was a seed that was planted for so long, and finally, just one day, he's like, you know what? I'm gonna do it. Let's plan it. I think that at some level, that little itty bitty seed had to be planted at some point. And finally, it just got to be so much and so much and so much that he finally decided it was time to plant it and to go through with it.
Yeah, I mean, taking it back to the whole kid thing, I know from people, and you read stories, the worst nightmare for anyone is that for someone to hurt their children or for anything to happen to their children. But just for someone to be the caregiver, the person who was supposed to, who's supposed to keep them safe and protect them, and then to do that to your own kids, I mean, there's no redeeming for that. There's no coming back from that. It's just sickening.
I mean, and it just has to show you what level of a sadistic mind he had to have, because it was not only 3 of his children, it was also his wife who bitched and griped and all that. I I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but there's a motive there. I get all
yeah.
that. But also your mother, your own mother too.
Yeah.
Who supposedly, what you were telling us early on, he was pretty devoted to.
Yeah, he was devoted to, like, his mom
and
was
she
like his
doted
biggest
on
supporter.
him, and she protected him from his
She
father and did everything for him. And you need $10,000. Here's $10,000, son. I know I'm too old to work, and it's probably never going to work again. And this is all I have left. But here's $10,000, son. Please have it. You're my child.
Yeah. You know. Yeah.
And that rotten motherfucker decides he's going to kill his family.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have anything good to say about him.
No.
So
no.
I don't have any words that aren't curse words to say about him.
I really want to.
I'm making up curse words for him right now in my head. None of them are nice.
I mean, I really have a question that I want to ask, but I think it's Pandora box if I open it.
Oh, please ask
it. Because, we're talking about his mother being the protector, his mother, the one that was providing for him, protecting from his father and all this stuff whenever he was younger. Yet he kills her. So I always go back whenever we're talking. We touched on this the other night on the phone call. Nature versus nurture. How did somebody get to that freaking point?
He killed his mother because he would never have been able to live with the look that would have been in his mother's eyes. If his mother was still alive.
Yeah. I also think he killed his mother because
he didn't want her to find out he was draining her accounts either.
Well, and he
that's
knew
shameful as well. He was stealing.
He knew that she was going to live in poverty if she lived at all. And
well, here's the thing, for being such a good fucking Lutheran boy, thou shalt not kill. Well, we broke that one. Thou shalt not steal. Well, we busted that one the hell off too.
I know, but like I think that because of what his father taught him, that it is God's punishment coming down on someone if they are poor, according to his father. That he didn't want his mother to be poor, so he's like, well, I might as well just go ahead and kill her now and save her the trouble and send her to heaven.
I think it has to go exactly the first thing that Shelley said. I don't think he could have looked her in the face. I don't think he could have stood in front of her and gave her an exact explanation for how much of a fuck up he was and for the shitty freaking crap that he just pulled. Yeah. And so because she was there, because she just happened to be there. But see, that makes me think, what if she wasn't there? What if she didn't move in?
She was
what
collateral damage.
True.
I think that if she would not have lived there, that he would have come up with a story that his wife ran off and took the children and he didn't know where she was. I can tell you that would have been the story.
Probably.
Because the only thing he cared about was himself. He can say that he was trying to save his kids and his wife from poverty and hell and all that kind of crap all day long. But at the end of the day, you know what? He should have been with them. Boom. Bye, buddy. Because at the end of the day, he was thinking about him. He could go make him alive.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
I am shedding this financial burden. I am shedding this financial burden. It's about me. I'm getting away with it. Yeah. He's free. They're not. They're in an early grave.
Are. They're free in a different way.
Yeah. I say they got an early grave because of him. And here's the thing too is, God Almighty, if there's anything that I have learned from reading about serial killers or from reading about mass murderers or killers in any way, it's okay to feel. It's okay to, it's okay to admit mistakes. It's okay to admit that there's something wrong. Seek help. Talk to somebody. Yeah. Because what happens is a lot of this shit just gets bottled up and these people react and act out in the worst ways possible. And the ones that aren't like completely sick, the ones that like have been kind of pushed to that point, but like even the ones that are sick need to reach out to people because they can help you get better.
Well, the way that's going to start is in this modern world that we live in now. Screw this story, but talking about this modern now, the way that's going to start is if we stop making mental health so freaking taboo.
Absolutely.
And start putting it front and center on advertisements in front of everybody and let them know that it's okay. It's not a freaking taboo subject. It's not something to be shameful of or be shamed for. You need help, reach out.
Yeah, like
that is a common denominator in all of these stories.
And how much would he have benefited from having a fucking therapist? How much would he have benefited from it? That he might not have went the way that he went if he had somebody to talk to. But
even if he had somebody to talk to, he wouldn't have talked to them.
Well, I'm saying, but according to his, I'm just saying, but according, Not then, especially because that was extremely taboo, more taboo than it is now. You don't talk to nobody.
Yeah.
You're less, according to their mentality, you are less of a person if you seek help. And I'm here to tell everyone right now, you are no less of a person if you ever seek help, because sometimes you need help and people need to seek help more to prevent shit like this from happening.
Yeah.
So that is, I agree with Shelley too. I believe that the life sentences were too good for him. I think he should have been drug out back and had done exactly to him what he did to his family. Because
it's exactly what one of the comments says. Place him in front of the freaking fire squad.
Mm-hmm. And here's the bad part about it too. I think that he was ashamed of what he was doing to his children, and that's why he shot them in the back of their head so they wouldn't see him doing it. But I think he wanted his mother and he wanted his wife to see him. Because he waited.
His mother in the back of the head too. He
shot his mother above the right eye.
She turned around and he shot her in the eye.
Well, but that's the thing. Both of them started. You said that as both of them started, he pointed at the back of their head, and they just happened to turn around.
That's cowardly.
Both of them
shoot him in the back. That's what a coward does. A coward shoots them in the back. That's cowardly. Yeah. He wasn't nothing but a sniveling, whiny little, unproductive, couldn't keep a fucking job coward.
Nope, exactly.
Loser of a fucking human being.
And Helen aside, like I said, they both had their problems, but Helen, she was sick and he was not. He thought about himself and himself only. And he was a sniveling little coward that didn't seek help. He didn't want help. He put himself in this because at any point
freedom.
I think it's
at
just
any
the fact
point
that
he could have said no, and he didn't.
I think it's
go ahead.
I was gonna say I think it's just the fact of his actions at the end.
Yes,
were cowardly. I even all the shit that he pulled. I'm not gonna go on record and say that him not reaching out, him not getting help, or anything like that is cowardly. I don't think that's cowardly. I think that he may have had inner shame, all that stuff. There's a lot more that plays into it. I think that the acts that ended in the end of it was so freaking cowardly because I think it was 100% me. It's about me. I've got to get free. I've got to do this. I'm going to quote unquote help them be free. But he chose to do it in such a cowardly way by just doing everything to their backs. So I think his final acts were cowardly.
And the thing is that if he would have truly wanted to, if he truly cared about a family, wanted to save them, wanted to do all this, you know what? Why wouldn't he have done something that A, for all practical purposes, wouldn't have hurt? And B, why didn't they all do it together? It was about him being free. It was about him escaping his life that he was miserable in. And of course, my question is, why you got to kill him? Just go get a divorce. Go get a divorce. Because now you've moved into the 70s now. I mean, the divorce is becoming, a little more accepted. But you know what? Then it would still be there. It would still be a problem for him at the end of the day.
Because of his stiff and rigid lifestyle and the rigid, what he thought a man should be and what a man should do. He wasn't going to do that.
But he thought it was okay for that a man should just, kill off his whole family. See, his thinking makes no damn sense to me.
Exactly. No, his logic is flawed. But
go get a divorce.
In his mind, he is completely justified. And actually, he wrote a book or a manifesto in prison about like what he did and why he did it. And to him, he was completely justified in what he did. So,
are you talking about the one that's called Collateral Damage?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a effed up title.
Yeah.
It's called Collateral Damage, and
by John List.
By John List and Austin Goodrich. That's where that's where a couple of these photos, like this photo, came from. That the one of him and his mother that I had put up earlier, the one of him and Helen right here, those all, the one of him and his mother, those all came from Collateral Damage, the book.
Yeah.
So I mean, you want to go read it?
I've read that book. And it is a crazy man's ramblings about how everything was against him, and no matter what he did, and he was so downtrodden and so put upon. And yes, I actually have read that book.
So do you think it was
quite disgusting?
So do you think it was latent narcissism that was buried? What do you think?
I think at the end of the day, that I think he truly didn't know what to do because he knew he was failing. And failure was the one thing that he couldn't do. So if I just make this go away, then nobody will ever know that I failed. And I'll start over and I'll do it right this time. I got it on my knees and I asked God for forgiveness and he forgave me. That means clean slate. So I start over. Guess what? There is no failure. I was forgiven. So I'm going to start over. Lunatic, lunacy, absolute nutty thinking. No. But see, if he annihilated all of his shame, got rid of all of his shame, and he started over with a fresh clean slate, and he could be the man that he thought that he should be and the man that would have lived up to his father's expectations.
I mean, but even then he started to fail when he started his other, consultant company, and his wife had to float him all this money in order to keep him going. It was just
he kept going.
A cycle of failure.
He hadn't failed yet.
He technically hadn't failed yet.
And that was his wife, so it was their money. So technically they weren't broken. He hadn't failed.
Exactly.
But I guarantee you.
I'm going to say right now, Shelly, you've wrapped up everything. What I was just sitting here thinking, you put it into such beautiful words for me. I appreciate that.
Sorry about all the F-bombs. I really hate that son
of
a bitch.
I will say this, though. I guarantee you, had it went on a little longer with her, she'd have wound up dead, too. I bet you fucking money.
You think the pattern would have repeated itself?
I think it would. I think it absolutely would have repeated itself.
No, I don't think so. I think that in this case that he is kind of those people. In the true crime world, family annihilators very rarely ever do it more than once because they feel like they've left it, they've accomplished that, and now that this is whatever they move on to is what their ideal is. And if I don't recall if in Collateral Damage he mentions if he mentions Dolores or not. But Dolores kind of idolizes him, kind of puts him on that pedestal and encourages him, and he isn't treated by her, even though she didn't really like him at first.
Yeah, she
grew to love him. The other lady, Helen, tried to trap him into marrying her. He didn't have to work to get Helen; he had to work to get Dolores. He earned it.
That's true.
Earned it.
True.
And it meant something to him.
Sense.
He didn't have to earn Helen. Helen was right there trying to trap him into marriage. But he had to earn Dolores.
I'm just saying.
It wasn't charity. Dolores wasn't charity. Helen was charity.
What I'm saying, though, is if had everything started to repeat itself and he started to fall down that financial hole again, I think he would have been driven to do it again. That's what I'm saying.
He was already at the age to retire by the time he was caught. He was an old man. His time to work was done. His gold watch time had passed.
Yeah.
He cooked because he wanted to cook. That wasn't failing. He was keeping busy as the Lord said he should do. Go read that book. In fact, don't go read that book.
Look, I'm just going to say
money in his pocket. Don't read that effing book.
I'm just going to say, if you are one of these that likes to research something after you hear somebody talk about it, another graphic content warning. There are some absolute horrible pictures out there.
I had to ask them not to show that. I can't handle it.
We have them. We are not going to show them. We all three decided last night with the state of everything of what everybody's been dealing with lately in this country that it is not right to show the close-up photos of this.
No.
That's why we chose the further away ones. So I just want to forewarn you, if you go research this afterwards, that there are some pretty
you can find
photos.
The crime scene photos in as gory and gruesome detail as you choose to see, and that is your call. But be warned, they are out there and they are horrible.
They're horrible.
Yes, they are.
Yep.
Horrible.
Yep.
And these gentlemen were kind enough. I said, please don't show this.
Yeah.
I can't do it. So they kindly agreed not to. Every now and then they kind of give in to me and and kind of acquiesce a little bit when I say, please don't.
But yeah, that's the story of John List.
Well, story of John List. Asshole.
Awful person.
May he rot in hell.
Absolutely, yes. And I pray that the flames never stop burning wherever he's at. But anyways.
Hope is. Never mind.
I think we'll leave it.
Make a South Park joke, weren't you? That's what I figured you were going.
Yeah. I think we'll leave it at that.
If he was on fire in front of me, I wouldn't piss on him to put him out. So
there you go.
Well, Ryan, I'm going to tell you, you did an excellent job
on
telling the story. As gruesome and awful as it is, I think you did it very respectfully, and you did a very good job.
Thank you.
Well, y'all, thank y'all so much for joining us for another week of Everything Vaguely Paranormal. Please remember, whatever social media channel you're watching us on, we are not just on that social media channel. We are across all social media channels. So make sure you go follow us across the board. We don't utilize one social media channel for everything, or so you're going to miss out a couple of things. Also, this weekend, we've got like 5 slots left on the investigation for the Gregg County Historical Museum. So if you want to go on an investigation with us this weekend, Saturday from 7 p.m. to 2 a.m., we will be in Longview, Texas, the Gregg County Historical Museum. We will repost the Eventbrite link so you can purchase those tickets. Very few slots left, so make sure you get on that. And also, we have our Old Park Hotel tickets on sale still as well for the October 7th and 8th. 2 nights investigation. If you choose to buy both nights, you can be there with us for upwards, I think it's like 40 hours. So anyways, take it away, Shelley.
You can also become a member of Patreon if you want to see what we really talk about in here. We really talk about, like we talk about, our calls and stuff like that. You can become a member of Patreon. It's $5 a month. There are no tiers. You get everything for the $5. You get all of our pre-broadcasts. You get Spirits with Shelley, Ryan's Reviews, and Bedtime with Blake. And you ought to tune in to today's pre-broadcast just to find out what my fucking fortune cookie said, okay? Gotta become a member of Patreon. Go ahead, Ryan, it's your turn.
So rate and review us on iTunes. Whew, well, I just dated myself. Huh? Rate and review us on Apple Music, on Spotify. I mean, if you have any questions about anything,
anywhere it says review.
Rate and review, absolutely, because you boost our signal, we can bring more to you guys. And if you have any questions about anything, if you're ever curious about anything, hit up our email address and ask, and we will address it as best we can. Blake, what is that email address?
The EVP pod. So that's THEEVPPOD @gmail.com.
Share us, subscribe, like, and
tell 2 friends about us, and have them tell 2 friends, and have them tell 2 friends.
Absolutely.
Spread the word.
Well, y'all, as always, I'm Blake Smith for my friends, Mr. Ryan Roberts, Mrs. Shelley Pruitt. We will see you next Tuesday. Bye, y'all.